I used to believe in love, the kind that felt like a steady heartbeat, strong and unwavering. I thought marriage was built on trust, on the quiet moments in between the chaos, on the certainty that no matter how hard things got, we'd face them together. But that was before I learned the truth, before I realized that sometimes the person you trust the most is the one sharpening the knife behind your back. My name is Caitlin Wilson, and I am a 38-year-old emergency physician at Houston Methodist Hospital. I worked tirelessly for years, pulling back-to-back shifts, sacrificing sleep and sanity to build the life I dreamed of. Long before I met Tom, I had a vision for my future, a secure, comfortable home where I could raise a family, a career that I was proud of, and a sense of independence no one could take from me. That's why, 2 years before Tom and I even crossed paths, I bought this house, a beautiful Victorian home in the Heights neighborhood of Houston. It was my safe haven, my sanctuary. I poured my heart into every detail, from the refurbished hardwood floors to the bookshelves built into the walls of the study. It wasn't just a house. It was a testament to everything I had worked for. Then Tom came along, and I let myself believe in fairy tales. Tom was charming, ambitious, and knew exactly what to say to make a woman feel special. He had a marketing firm and always talked about his big plans, the future he was building for us. He swept me off my feet and made me feel like I wasn't just a doctor working endless shifts, but a woman worthy of being cherished. Within a year, we were married. A year later, I gave birth to our beautiful twins, Emma and Ethan. From the outside looking in, we had it all. A gorgeous home, a picture-perfect marriage, and 2 adorable children. But behind closed doors, cracks had started forming. Small things at first. The way Tom's phone was always face down, the late nights at work that turned into weekends away for business trips. Then there were the comments. Subtle digs about how much time I spent at the hospital, how I was too independent for my own good, and how he felt like I was shutting him out. I ignored it. I told myself every marriage had rough patches. But deep down, something about Tom's behavior didn't sit right with me. Then came the papers. It was a regular Tuesday evening. I had just come home from a grueling shift, exhaustion weighing me down as I kissed my children goodnight. Tom was already in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. I barely had time to set my purse down before he slid a stack of documents across the counter. "I need you to sign these," he said casually, as if they were just another bill to pay. I glanced down, scanning the first few lines. "Property transfer agreement." My heartbeat stalled. I looked up at him. "What is this?" "It's just a small adjustment," he said smoothly, taking another sip of whiskey. "For tax purposes. It'll help us financially if the house is under my name instead of yours." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, but he wasn't. He was completely serious. "Tom, I bought this house before we even met," I said carefully. "Why would I need to transfer it to you?" He sighed, setting his glass down. "Caitlin, I handle our finances. You're always at the hospital working ridiculous hours. I'm just trying to take care of things. You trust me, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the papers, flipping through them. Something wasn't right. "You don't have to read all of it," Tom said quickly. "It's just a standard process. If you really cared about our marriage, you'd understand why this makes sense." There it was. The manipulation. The guilt-tripping. The way he twisted things made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. I set the papers down and forced a smile. "Let me think about it." His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. Just don't take too long." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. Why was he pushing so hard for this? Why now? The next morning, I called Nina, my best friend, and an attorney specializing in real estate law. As soon as I explained the situation, she let out a low whistle. "Caitlin, do not sign those papers," she warned. "There is no tax benefit in transferring the house to his name. In fact, it could put you at serious risk. If your name is removed, you'd have no legal claim to it anymore." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "So, if I signed, you could lose everything?" Nina confirmed. And knowing Tom, I'd bet my career that this isn't just about taxes. My stomach twisted. I had spent so much time trusting Tom, assuming he had my best interests at heart. But now I wasn't so sure. I decided to dig deeper. That evening, while Tom was in the shower, I accessed our shared bank account from my laptop. Normally, I didn't pay much attention to it. Tom managed our big expenses while I handled everyday costs. But now, I needed to see where our money was going, and that's when I found it. A series of monthly transfers. $10,000, each month for nearly 2 years. The recipient? A name I didn't recognize, Destiny Martinez. My hands started shaking. I copied down the account details, took screenshots, and sent everything to Nina. Then I did something I had never done before. I checked Tom's phone records. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the endless calls and messages to a single number. The same one, Destiny Martinez. My vision blurred. My breath came out in short, shaky gasps. This wasn't just about the house. This was something bigger. The next day, Nina called me back with the final confirmation. Caitlin, I had someone run a background check. Destiny Martinez is a real estate agent. She recently purchased a property here in Houston, a house worth nearly $1 million. And guess whose name is also on the mortgage? My mouth went dry. Tom. Yes. Caitlin, he's not just trying to take your house. He's planning a whole new life with her. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My husband, the man I trusted, the father of my children, was stealing from me, planning to leave me for another woman and using my own money to do it. And the worst part? He thought I was too blind to see it coming, but he had no idea who he was messing with. I didn't sleep much after that night. The truth weighed on me, curling around my mind like a vice, refusing to let go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the transaction history, the name Destiny Martinez, and the mortgage with Tom's signature. Every time I opened them, I was still trapped in the same house with the man who had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let him win. The next morning, I got up early, careful not to wake Tom, and locked myself in my home office. My hands shook as I logged into my laptop, sifting through our bank records again. $500,000. That's how much money he had siphoned off in the past 2 years. My money, my emergency fund, my investment portfolio, and the savings I had worked tirelessly to build, he had been draining them behind my back. I swallowed the rising nausea and called Nina. I need a plan, I told her, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. I want to take him down. There was a pause before she responded. Then, listen carefully. Nina laid it all out for me. What I needed to do, how I needed to move. I had to be smart and calculated. If I acted too soon, Tom might realize I was onto him. If I acted too late, I might lose my chance. Step 1. Gather evidence. I needed more than just bank statements. I needed proof that he was siphoning my money with intent to defraud me. Step 2. Protect my assets. Nina helped me set up a new bank account, one Tom didn't have access to, and I began quietly moving my funds, little by little, so it wouldn't raise suspicion. Step 3. Watch and wait. The waiting was the hardest part. That night, I played my role perfectly. I came home, kissed my kids, and made dinner like everything was normal. But I was watching Tom now, really watching him. The way he kept glancing at his phone, the way his jaw tensed when I casually mentioned I was thinking about meeting with a financial advisor, the way he rushed to clear away the dinner plates when Emma accidentally knocked over her juice, as if he didn't want me near the documents he had left on the counter. It made me sick. After I put the twins to bed, Tom poured himself a whiskey and leaned against the kitchen island, watching me. So, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, did you get a chance to look over the papers? I smiled, playing the part. I did, and I have some questions. His jaw twitched. Like what? I picked up the stack of documents and flipped through them, pretending to be oblivious. You said it was for tax benefits. But I spoke to Nina, and she told me there's no actual financial advantage to transferring the house into your name. A flicker of something, irritation, crossed his face, but he recovered quickly. Babe, he sighed, setting his glass down. I don't know why Nina is filling your head with nonsense, but this is just a technicality. It doesn't change anything. The house is still ours. I feigned hesitation. I just don't understand why it needs to be in your name alone. Tom stepped closer, slipping an arm around my waist. It made my skin crawl. Because I take care of our family, Caitlin. You work crazy hours. You don't have time to deal with all this legal stuff. Just trust me, okay? I forced myself to hold his gaze. Trust him. The words nearly made me laugh. Instead, I nodded slowly. Okay, I'll think about it. His grip tightened slightly. Just don't take too long. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Of course. I waited until he fell asleep before slipping out of bed and into the office. Time to take the next step. The next morning, I followed through on my plan. I installed hidden cameras in key areas: his office, the living room, even the kitchen. I backed up every piece of financial evidence I had found, storing copies on a secure drive. And then I went to the real estate office where Destiny had recently checked in. I wore my white coat, my hospital badge clipped onto my pocket, giving off the impression of a professional woman with important business. As soon as I stepped inside, I spotted her sitting at a desk, chatting with a colleague. She was younger than I expected, mid-20s, long brunette hair, flawless makeup, the kind of woman Tom used to roll his eyes at when we watched reality TV together. I walked up to the receptionist and smiled. "Hi, I'm looking for Destiny Martinez. I'm interested in buying a property." Destiny glanced up at the sound of her name. When our eyes met, she froze. I saw it then. The recognition, the guilt. She knew exactly who I was, but she covered it up well, standing up smoothly and flashing a bright, customer service smile. "Hi, I'm Destiny. How can I help you today?" I returned her smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I'd love to discuss my options," I said, "particularly regarding any properties that my husband might have purchased with you." The color drained from her face. Her colleague looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. I'll give you two a moment." As soon as we were alone, Destiny cleared her throat, shifting uncomfortably. I don't know what you mean." I pulled out my phone and slid a photo across the desk. A picture of her and Tom, standing in front of a house, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist, her lips parted, eyes flicking to mine in panic. "I know everything," I said calmly. "So let's skip the denials and get straight to the part where you tell me exactly what Tom has been planning." She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of her desk. "Look, I didn't know." I leaned in. "I'm a doctor. Destiny, that means I know when someone is lying to me. So let's try this again." Destiny's hands shook slightly as she exhaled sharply. "Tom told me you guys were separating, that it was mutual, that you knew about me." I tilted my head. "Did he also tell you that he was using my money to fund your little real estate dreams?" She blinked. "What?" I pulled out the bank statements and slid them across the desk. "Every transaction, every payment, every dollar he stole from me to build a new life with you." Her breath hitched as she scanned the papers. Then, slowly, her expression changed. The shock faded, replaced by something else. Rage. She looked up at me, realization dawning. "He lied to me." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Welcome to the club." For a long moment, she just stood there, her hands curling into fists. Then she exhaled sharply and said, "What do you want?" I smiled. "Your help." By the time I left the office, I had everything I needed. Destiny, furious at Tom's betrayal, spilled everything. How he promised they'd move in together, how he assured her he'd get me to sign over the house, and how he had even convinced her to take out loans in her name to secure additional properties. He had been playing both of us, but now the game was over. That night, as I sat across from Tom at dinner, I felt a sense of clarity settle over me. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to let him think he had won. Let him think I was still considering signing the papers. Let him think he had everything under control. And then, I was going to destroy him. I spent the next few days perfecting my plan. Tom had underestimated me and had believed I would remain blind to his deception until it was too late. But what he didn't realize was that he was the one walking into a trap, one that I was carefully constructing piece by piece. I played the part of the obedient, confused wife perfectly. I let Tom think I was considering signing over the house. I asked him innocent questions about the process, feigning hesitation, but never outright refusing. His impatience grew by the day, though he tried to hide it behind that same charming smile that once fooled me. Then, one evening, while we were having dinner, I dropped the final bait. "I've been thinking about it," I said, pushing my salad around my plate. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I should just sign the papers and get it over with." Tom stilled for a fraction of a second, his fork halfway to his mouth. Then he carefully set it down, schooling his expression into one of gentle understanding. "That's great, babe," he said, reaching for my hand. "I knew you'd come around." I forced a smile. "But I want to do it properly. Maybe we can meet with a notary together, just so I feel more comfortable." His fingers twitched slightly, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. He wanted me to sign it as soon as possible, before I had a chance to change my mind. But he also didn't want to seem pushy. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Let's do it this weekend." Perfect, because by this weekend, he wouldn't have anything left. The next day, I put the second part of my plan into motion. Step 1. Protecting my assets. With Nina's help, I finalized the process of moving all my money into a separate account. I also made sure to freeze any joint accounts that Tom had access to. If he tried to make another shady withdrawal, he would find himself locked out. Step 2. Securing my home. With the paperwork ready, I went a step further. I contacted a forensic accountant Nina recommended, and together, we dug up more dirt on Tom. Turns out, he had even more hidden debts than I thought. Gambling losses, outstanding loans, unpaid credit card balances. The house was never about tax benefits. He needed money fast. Step 3. Gathering witnesses. This part was a stroke of pure brilliance, and I had Destiny to thank for it. After our confrontation at the real estate office, Destiny had turned into an unexpected ally. She wanted revenge just as much as I did, and she agreed to play a crucial role in my trap. Together, we set up a dinner party at our house. I invited a few close friends, people Tom had always tried to impress, including one of his business associates, a real estate agent, and most importantly, a lawyer I hired to pose as a family friend. Tom had no idea what was coming. That Saturday night, the house was filled with laughter, wine glasses clinking, and the scent of expensive steaks sizzling on the grill. Tom was in his element, enjoying the attention, basking in the illusion that everything was going exactly the way he wanted. And then, when the moment was just right, I made my move. I stood up, holding a glass of wine, and smiled sweetly at Tom. "I have something special for tonight," I announced. "A little surprise." Tom raised an eyebrow, still smug and unaware. I turned on the living room TV, and on the screen, footage began to play, hidden camera recordings of him and Destiny, not just their affair, but the conversations they had in our home, discussions about tricking me into signing over the house, plans of how he would drain my accounts before disappearing. The room fell silent. Tom's face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, standing abruptly. I set down my wine glass. "Evidence." Then I turned to Destiny, who had been sitting quietly this whole time. She stood up, crossed her arms, and looked Tom dead in the eye. "I told you," she said coldly. "You should have never lied to me." His expression collapsed. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again. He was cornered. That's when Nina, my lawyer friend, stepped forward, placing a stack of documents on the table. "And these," she said, flipping through them, "are records of your financial fraud, Tom? Transactions linked to embezzlement, fraudulent loans, and asset misrepresentation?" Tom snapped. He lunged toward the table, grabbing the papers, his face twisting with rage. "You set me up," he growled at me. I took a sip of wine. "No, Tom, you set yourself up." Then I nodded toward the front door, and the police walked in. It all unraveled so fast. Tom tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The police officers presented a warrant for his arrest, citing financial fraud and attempted real estate deception. "Caitlin," he hissed as they put cuffs on his wrists. "You're making a mistake." I tilted my head. "No, Tom, I'm fixing one." The last thing I saw before they took him away was the absolute panic in his eyes. And it was beautiful. The fallout was delicious. Tom's business crumbled overnight. His clients, upon hearing of his fraudulent activities, pulled out immediately. His reputation? Destroyed. He lost everything. Destiny, though furious at being deceived, had covered her tracks well. She cut ties with Tom completely and walked away free. I didn't blame her. She had been played just like I had. As for me, I filed for divorce immediately and secured full custody of the twins. I kept my house, my assets, and my career, everything that was rightfully mine. And the best part? Tom, in his arrogance, had thought he could steal from me and get away with it. Instead, he lost everything. Weeks later, I received a letter from Tom, a pathetic, handwritten note from prison. He begged for forgiveness, said he had been desperate, said he still loved me. I burned it, and as I watched the paper curl into ash, I felt nothing but freedom. The day after Tom was arrested, I woke up to a house that felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had shed the weight of his deception. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, staring at the quiet stillness around me. This was mine. Every corner, every floorboard, every memory made in this house. None of it belonged to him anymore. But the battle wasn't over yet. Tom's lawyer had already sent an email requesting a meeting. He wanted to negotiate, plead for leniency, and spin some pathetic excuse about why he deserved a second chance. Too bad for him. I wasn't in the business of second chances anymore. The first thing I did was meet with Nina, my attorney and best friend, to strategize the next steps. "You have every legal right to everything, Caitlin," she reassured me, flipping through paperwork. "You never signed those transfer papers. The fraud charges against him are airtight. The courts will see right through any poor me routine he tries to pull." "But," I prompted, sensing hesitation. Nina sighed. "But he's going to fight dirty. I'm sure his lawyer is already looking for ways to spin this into you being a workaholic wife who drove him away." I laughed at the absurdity of it. The way men like Tom always found ways to blame their failures on the women who had sacrificed everything for them. "Let him try," I said, sipping my coffee. "He's got nothing left to bargain with." And I was right. By the time Tom's lawyer attempted to negotiate a settlement, I had already blocked every loophole he could have used. His assets were frozen, his reputation was ruined, and he had no leverage. That meeting lasted all of 15 minutes. The news of Tom's downfall spread like wildfire through Houston's business circles. His former colleagues distanced themselves instantly, with most of his high-profile clients dropping him overnight. Destiny, his once prized mistress, was quick to cut ties as well. "She took the first flight out to Miami," Nina told me over drinks one evening. "Looks like she's already moved on to her next wealthy idiot." I wasn't even surprised. Tom had lied to everyone, not just me. He had no real friends, no real allies. And now, he had no real future. With Tom out of my life, I poured my energy into rebuilding, not just for myself, but for Emma and Ethan. I renovated the house, making it truly feel like my own again. I threw out every last reminder of Tom, from his overpriced suits to the ridiculous whiskey collection he had prided himself on. It was cathartic, watching his life disappear into garbage bags. At work, I thrived. Without the constant emotional exhaustion of being betrayed in my own home, I was more focused, more confident. I was offered a promotion to Chief of Emergency Medicine, a position Tom had once told me I'd never be able to manage while raising kids. I took it with pride. The best part? I never had to hear his voice again. A few weeks later, I received a final letter from Tom, written from jail. It was filled with apologies, excuses, and pleas for forgiveness. I didn't read past the first paragraph. Instead, I fed it to my fireplace and watched it burn. Because I wasn't just moving on, I was rising. The aftermath of Tom's downfall was both chaotic and liberating. The scandal had spread far beyond our personal circle. His fraud, betrayal, and ultimate arrest had made headlines. It wasn't just office gossip. It was the kind of downfall that people love to dissect over coffee. But while his world was crumbling, mine was being rebuilt. Legally, Tom was still trying to fight. His lawyer attempted to argue for shared custody of the twins, despite his clear lack of involvement as a father. The audacity of it all. "He thinks he can still manipulate you," Nina said one evening, as we reviewed his latest pathetic legal requests. "Then he doesn't know me at all," I muttered, signing the final paperwork. The judge agreed. I was granted full custody of Emma and Ethan. Tom's parental rights were reduced to supervised visits if he could prove he had reformed, which, given his current situation, was laughable. With Tom legally out of my life, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I threw myself into my work, excelling in my new role as Chief of Emergency Medicine. Without his constant undermining and emotional drain, I rediscovered my passion for the job. I also began redecorating the house, removing every trace of Tom's presence. I painted the walls, changed the furniture, and even replaced the kitchen table where he had once slid those fraudulent papers across the counter. The biggest change was in my outlook. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. One afternoon, while taking the twins to the park, I ran into someone unexpected, Michael Carter, a former colleague of Tom's. "I heard what happened," he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "Let me guess. You're here to tell me how shocking it all was?" I asked, crossing my arms, but Michael shook his head. "Actually, I wanted to say that you handled it brilliantly. A lot of people knew Tom was shady, but no one expected him to crash and burn that hard." I studied him for a moment. Unlike the others who had abandoned Tom the moment he fell, Michael didn't seem fake. We chatted for a while, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Really laughed. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was the start of something new. As I tucked Emma and Ethan into bed that night, I felt nothing but gratitude. Not for what I had gone through, but for where I had ended up. Tom had tried to destroy me. Instead, he set me free. The dust had finally settled. Tom was gone, both from my life and from any position of power he once held. His downfall had been swift, brutal, and most importantly, well-earned. His embezzlement charges meant he was facing years in prison, and with every burned bridge behind him, there was no one left to bail him out. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought had been lost forever: peace. A month after the trial, I received an envelope in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakable. Tom. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a pathetic, groveling letter filled with self-pity and half-hearted apologies. Caitlin, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I regret everything. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I lost everything. I lost you, our family. I see that now. Please, let me see the twins. Please, I scoffed. The same man who tried to steal my home, who betrayed me for years, who wanted to erase me from my own life, and now he wanted to be a father? I didn't bother responding. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. A few days later, I heard from my lawyer that Tom had tried to file for visitation rights. But with his criminal record, history of financial fraud, and the evidence of him trying to steal my house, the court saw him for what he was: a man unfit to be a father. His petition was denied on the spot. That was the last time I ever heard from Tom. My career had never been better. Becoming chief of emergency medicine had given me a sense of fulfillment that I hadn't felt in years. The long shifts were exhausting, but this time, there was no one at home belittling me for them. The house, my house, had transformed into a true sanctuary. The ghosts of Tom's deception had been erased with fresh coats of paint, new furniture, and laughter that filled every room. I took down every reminder of him, the framed wedding photos, the anniversary gifts I had once cherished. I reclaimed my home, and the twins, they were thriving. At first, I worried about how they'd cope without their father, but they adapted faster than I expected. Ethan was obsessed with dinosaurs, always stomping around the house pretending to be a T-Rex. Emma, on the other hand, had started drawing everything she saw, covering the fridge in colorful doodles. They still asked about their father occasionally, but I kept my answers honest yet simple. Daddy made bad choices, I told them one night as I tucked them into bed. Ethan frowned, his small hands clutching his stuffed dinosaur. So he's not coming back? No, sweetheart. I smoothed his hair. But we're okay, aren't we? Emma nodded, curling against her pillow. Yeah, we're okay, Mommy. And we were. One evening, as I sat on my front porch, sipping a glass of wine, Michael Carter showed up again. Michael had been one of the lead detectives who helped expose Tom's financial crimes. He had been a steady presence throughout the case, a voice of reason when everything felt chaotic. Hey, he greeted, hands in his pockets. I was in the neighborhood. I raised a brow. Oh? Do you just casually wander through my neighborhood now? He chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to check on you. I gestured to the peaceful street, to the warm glow coming from inside my home. I think I'm doing just fine. He nodded, smiling. Yeah? You really are. For the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine a future without fear. Without the burden of betrayal, the weight of always looking over my shoulder. Michael lingered a little longer than usual that night, and when he finally left, I found myself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for something new. A few months later, I heard through the grapevine that Destiny had moved on, to another wealthy target, of course. She had abandoned Tom the moment he got arrested, proving she was just as selfish as he was. It was poetic justice. Tom had risked everything for her, and in the end, he had nothing. As for me, I had everything I needed. I had my children, my home, my freedom. I had a future, and most of all, I had peace. I took a deep breath, looking around my home, finally free of its ghosts. I had won, not because I had destroyed Tom, but because I had survived him, and sometimes that's the best revenge of all.